hope.
I don't know. They might want to throw us overboard.
Uh-oh. Yes. Well, Timothy, we're alive now.
Oh, okay. So
Oh,
good morning to people on Clubhouse, right?
also,
Because they're signed in now, but we're not on LinkedIn yet, right?
we are on LinkedIn too.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we are there too. So
Okay.
behave.
I'm trying to.
Right. Okay. Shall we start with the intro
Let's
that
go.
you made for us? Okay. Do you want to dance in front of everybody, or shall we leave it for another day? It's the 100th time of Japanese
It's
politics
our
today. So
100th episode,
yes.
consecutive 100 Sundays in a row, Maya.
So Timothy, if you are okay dancing, then I'll keep you on screen.
Okay, get it going.
Great.
We're
Oh,
gonna
how
lose
do
half
I
our
do?
audience though.
I don't know how to do this. Oh, here we go. Okay. So here we go.
Good
And
morning from Katsuyama, Maya.
good morning to you from Tokyo, Timothy. I'm happy to see that you're in great shape again today. So good to know that.
We're back on schedule. So for the last 2 weeks, as you know, I was in the foothills of Mount Fuji, broadcasting from a cabin there, trying to keep warm and not dying while I'm giving the briefing. But now we're back on schedule. Work has started. I'm back on the deck of the good ship Santana and giving you one of our weekly briefings on what's going on in Japanese politics.
Great. So I believe that you have quite a few things to tell us today, and hope that it's not too cold there. It's not too sunny, so that you don't get a sunburn. But if you do, yes, that's
Well,
okay.
it's a 3 day weekend, as you know. Um, Monday is a national holiday because it's coming of age day, right?
It is, yes.
And you know, this year is going to be unique in the coming of age day because they moved the maturity date from 20 to 18 uh, almost 2 years ago, but it
Mhm.
didn't catch up to us at this date last year. So this date, on this Sunday, there's going to be a vastly larger number of people who are enjoying coming of age than it was in the past. So it'll be
All
the
right.
18, 19, and 20 year olds this year for the first time.
Oh, so you're going to be there too,
I
hopefully.
am not. I'm going to get as far away as I can from it. I will be in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, um, away from it all.
Okay, so maybe next year you can join the ceremony. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I don't know if that's really not for me. But, you know, Maya, once again, this is our 100th consecutive Sunday together. And
right.
it is cause for some celebration. I mean, it's a hard thing to do for anything in any kind of relationship or business or 100 consecutive whatever, weeks or days or months. And we've
Indeed.
been doing this, every week for 100 weeks. I really am so honored and thankful for you pushing me and threatening me and
All the time.
terrorizing me so that I'm here every Sunday morning. But what an achievement. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Timothy, and I promise you to continue doing exactly that. So,
Well, you've always said consistency is
mhm.
it generates lots of different benefits, and one of the benefits is we have a sponsor for today's show. These wonderful throat lozenges that I received from Czechoslovakia, and
Yeah,
so if my voice sounds a little bit more golden,
it's because of the
it's
drops
because
there.
of our sponsor. So pick these up, everybody. They're wonderful.
Yes, great. Well, thank you so much for the intro and for oh the drops as well. Anyway, so I'll just leave you now on
Okay.
stage by
All right.
yourself, so you can actually brief in brief us on what happened last week in
Okay.
Japanese politics, and the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. And as everybody knows, this briefing is in two segments. We have the live version. Well, it's basically live, a live version that is simultaneously broadcast on LinkedIn, and that's the visual component. And that's for the briefing only. And then it continues on Clubhouse for the Q&A. And we usually go for about 60 or 90 minutes in the Q&A after this briefing. So please continue to join. These podcasts are always loaded up on YouTube by Maya just almost as immediately after we finish the show. So you can pick those up too if you're interested. So there's a lot going on. We're in our new year now. The diet has not been in session. They have announced. I predicted that the diet would be in session probably at around the 27th of January. They set the date on the 23rd, 1 week earlier. The prime minister is on something of a whirlwind trip. You know, Japan became once again a non-permanent member of the Security Council, and also this year is the chair of the G7, which allows it to host the G7 in April. These are really big deals. They're big deals for the prime minister, who prides himself. He was the longest serving foreign minister. He prides himself on his diplomacy, on his ability to bob and weave in international geopolitical, but he's not as firm on his footing on the domestic issues, and that comes up time and time again, and that is one of the reasons why he's in a little bit of a conundrum right now. As you know, he just lost his fourth state minister, Mr. Akiba. He had to let him go after the new year, after everybody came back. He's had, you know, in 1 month, he lost 3. And in the diet session, he did not want to risk causing further disruption by having a fourth one leave. It's never happened for a Japanese prime minister to lose 3 in 1 month, and to lose 4 within the span of 2 months during one diet session. The extraordinary diet session, I think, was calculated by him as being just way too much. He would suffer too much retribution as a consequence of that. And plus, the individual, the reconstruction minister, Mr. Akiba, is from the Motegi faction, the number 2 largest faction. So the largest faction is the former Abe faction, Seiwai Kenkyu Kai. The second one is Mr. Motegi's. Then there's Taro Aso's faction. And number 5 is the Kishida faction. So he really is, you know, he's really indebted to those factions that are larger than his. And he has to distribute these state ministerial portfolios according to those kinds of calculations. Not only that, but he has to preserve one for Komeito because they are in the coalition. And he has to he has to give them at least a cabinet position in order to qualify as a coalition partner. And otherwise, you know, nobody's going to join the LDP in a coalition. So that calculus continues now. He did let Mr. Akiba go, and the diet session moved up 1 week. And in this kind of situation that he's confronting now, he closed out the year, you'll remember, with this demonstration of what the budget for defense enhancement looks like, increasing the defense budget, you know, 100% within 5 years. But actually, with regard to defense spending for 2023, the year that we are entering into now, the defense spending is going to go about 26% higher in the first year to kick things off. So there's a lot of missile defense programs and things to just prime the pump that is just only now being revealed at the end of the year. I think people haven't really had much of a time to digest it. And the idea that of every year, the 4 trillion that is required every year for 5 years to get to that mark, 1 trillion needs to come from Japanese consumers. So there will be a tax increase. There will be something that is done so that the money comes out of the Japanese population. This caused a lot of controversy, but then we closed up the year. So that it's probably not accurately described as pent-up frustration. It's probably just this realization after the new year. And once the diet gets started, the opposition party is sharpening their knives to go at the prime minister as a consequence of that. So from January 23rd, it's going to be very lively. He's trying to diminish as many of those issues as possible. And he's shoring up what he does best, which is diplomacy. So he's leaving for the United States on Monday. He's going to visit France, Italy, and the UK, and then meet with Joe Biden on the 13th. So that's a lot of traveling to do just before the diet session starts. And I think what he's attempting to do is there are certain things that he's good at, and there's certain things that he's not good at. He doesn't want to lose his position. He's lost a fourth minister of state, and the opposition party is, smelling blood in the water. He was lucky to get out of the extraordinary diet session by passing the supplemental budget, a tremendous supplemental budget, about half of the supplemental budget to be spent before fiscal 2023 starts, which is in April of this year. So in the next 4 months, the budget for the defense outlay for 5 years, one half of that was devoted to the supplemental budget. So that's a tremendous amount of money. He was successful in passing that. He was successful in passing the 3 defense documents that include all of the things of what Japan's posture is with regard to China, with regard to North Korea, with regard to the U.S.-Japan security alliance, and also just the incredible 2+2 meetings that they've been having with foreign ministers and defense ministers with all of the allies. This coalition of forces continues to increase. You're going to see a lot more of that in the coming months in 2023, as the Japanese defense starts to actually absorb some of the goods and the systems that is being purchased largely from the United States for defense against potential Chinese attack or potential North Korea attack. While we're talking about North Korea, there's been a lot of action going on there. You might recall that at the close of the year, North Korea fired 4 missiles, and they wanted to show people who are watching, and people are watching very carefully, the accuracy, the pinpoint accuracy of one of the particular missiles that they fired. None of them entered the Japan economic zone, the exclusive economic zone, and none of them fell into Korean economic waters. But 4 at the end of the year, I mean, this is the largest number of missile firings, I think about 41 for this last year. And it looks like it's going to be increasing. There's also been, somewhat alarmingly, not quite for the first time, but a drone incursion from North Korea into South Korea. There were 4 drones that crossed the border. They did some survey of the executive mansion and of the airport there. They shut the airport down. It was a big deal. They rallied the jets to chase these guys down. They fired. I think they might have shot one of them down, and they went back to North Korea. And then the very next day, South Korea retaliated by doing exactly the same thing and sending swarms of drones across the border. The posture of South Korea has been to respond to North Korean provocations in a tit for tat. So this is an invitation for a tremendous escalation. And you're seeing that more and more gradually. When they fire a rocket, then there is a response from South Korea. And this drone crossing, going back and forth, and the firing of the howitzers that happened about 2 months ago. There was a volley that happened, and it was responded to by South Korea. It just is continuing to ratchet up, and it doesn't look like it's going to be settling down anytime soon. This new feature with drone incursions is somewhat maybe expected as technology is approaching, and the capability of drones is really increasing rapidly. Even Japan is getting into that, not just the aerial drones, but also underwater drones that are attached to submarines and to destroyers for search and destroy kind of maneuvers. So this technology is growing very rapidly. Apparently the North Koreans are exploiting that too, and this kind of cat and mouse game continues unabated. It looks like North Korea is building up for some other big event. The next big event that is anticipated is the actual explosion of a nuclear device, and that is anticipated within the next couple of months, because that's just it's about time if they're going to ignore all of the agreements they've made about non-proliferation. And in regard to that, South Korea too it's not a nuclear-free zone. South Korea is also bolstering its nuclear capabilities. So one of the ideas earlier in the decade was, to make North Korea a nuclear-free zone. There was a lot of energy put into that. The North Koreans were given a lot of technology by Bill Clinton with the promise not to expand into nuclear warfare, and that didn't work out very well. So this constant march going forward is alarming, and I think is really the reason why the Japanese are convinced and maybe promoted by the United States to increase the budget a huge amount, 100%. Who would have thought of that if we had this conversation 3 years ago? It just would have been untenable. And for this to happen so quickly without too much of a debate or a dialogue is really alarming too. But it is going to happen, and it is somewhat inevitable with what's going on in China, what's going on in North Korea, and what's going on with Russia. So the Prime Minister has a lot of balls in the air. He's trying to balance them, and many people believe, this is not the time for you, Mr. Prime Minister, to be going on foreign visits. You need a diet that is going to be working towards your benefit to pass the budget for 2024 this year. When this diet session ends, you've got to do that actually before it ends. The budget is due to be passed. The fiscal year starts on April 1st, so that budget needs to be passed by then. And if he runs into the same kind of problems that he had when he launched the extraordinary session, which he really didn't want to do, he knew the opposition party was going to be, gnawing at his ankles because of the Unification Church and his explanation about the Abe funeral and all of those kinds of things. He lost a lot of political capital dealing with that and wasn't able to have as successful an extraordinary diet session as he wished. So he wants to avoid that. He's trying to be nice with people, and being nice with people also has its own repercussions. So we've talked about this before. I know I dwell a lot on Mr. Kishida and what he's dealing with, but in Japanese politics, in politics anywhere, it's mostly about survival. It's mostly about political survival and of the economy and the people and dealing with education and birth rates and stuff like that. That's secondary or tertiary. That's the main thing is staying in power, keeping your seat, winning your election. So when these issues come up, they really suck all the oxygen out of the air. So the prime minister wants to remain prime minister. There are a lot of voices out there that say, look, you've lost four state ministers in about 2 months. That hasn't happened. And that hasn't happened for a prime minister who's suffering the approval rating that you are suffering. You are in the low 30s, the high 20s, depending on who you talk to, what day of the week. There's not a recent poll out right now. I expect one next week, but it might be burnished a little bit because of his foreign trip and the photo opportunities with Joe Biden and slapping on the back and things like that. He will be with foreign leaders in Italy, the UK, and France. I believe it's France. Yes, in France. And so he's going to be finishing that up in time to come back and then open the diet session on the 23rd. The other things that are going on with the prime minister, we have local elections that start in April. This is a big deal. This is for governors, for not all governors, but it's kind of like the local elections or the midterm elections in many other democracies, where half of the local elections they're paced so that they're in the spring. So here in Japan, a lot of mayors and a lot of governors will be going up for election, and a lot of local municipal members will be also going up for election. The LDP wants to dominate that. They want that to be a bulwark for them to establish more prominence when eventually a lower house election is called. And that's something that the prime minister is toying with, is calling an election in order to make his president or his prime ministership last a little bit longer. I don't think that's going to happen. We talked about the options that he had about shuffling his cabinet, taking care of Mr. Akiba, moving one state minister out, or maybe two or three, or just the whole lot, or just calling for a snap election, or finally maybe just not doing anything. So he took the one of least resistance, the path of least resistance. He had to let go of Mr. Akiba, and now he's on his worldwide diplomacy event. He'll be gone for a week. He's talking with it is a coalition with Komeito, which is the political arm of the Buddhist lay religion, Soka Gakkai. And the relationship there is not very good. Previously, under the Abe administration, when Komeito and the LDP got really, really tight, so the LDP lost power, you might remember, just before the 3/11 disaster, the nuclear disaster, the tsunami. But they were out of power and came back into power as a consequence of this tightness that Mr. Abe was able to form with Komeito. And Komeito brought a lot of votes into the LDP and allowed Mr. Abe to become and remain prime minister, actually the longest serving prime minister as a consequence. That relationship was formed not so much on policy unity, because there's a lot of difference between, the Komeito, who likes to be known as the party of peace, and the LDP, which is the party for business and defense issues and, kind of a strong nation. So there's a little bit of tension there, but they did accommodate some of that because Komeito wanted to be in the government. It wanted to be a contributing member. It wanted that one cabinet seat, maybe two if they could squeeze it out. They really haven't been able to get more than one. But the relationship was basically on a personal level with the president of Komeito and Mr. Nikai, who was at that time the Secretary General of the LDP, and then Mr. Abe and the Seiwakai, the largest faction within the LDP. And now with the assassination of Mr. Abe, with Mr. Nikai being pushed out, and now he's being replaced by Mr. Motegi as the Secretary General, this cohesion between the LDP and Komeito is very, very weak, dangerously weak. And there's not much of a fruitful, robust communication channel that has replaced what was formerly there. So there are some tensions there. And Mr. Kishida is very aware of that. He's trying to repair it, but he's also looking at other opposition parties. So there's the Constitutional Democratic Party, there's the Democratic Party for the People, and there's also Ishin no Kai, which is basically, I guess you could say, an Osaka formed party. Looks a lot like the LDP, but it's formed in Osaka, but it has national reach. It's very strong. It's getting stronger here in Tokyo as well. So these April elections, all of these forces are going to come to the fore. And Mr. Kishida wants to make sure that he's got Komeito, but he also would like to have some relationships with these other opposition parties. The problem with, it's no guarantee with Komeito, because the Unification Church was also a religious organization very similar to Komeito. They were on their way to building their own political base, like Komeito. They hadn't really gotten that together, but they were very familiar with a lot of members of the Diet. And so there's a lot of similarity there. On the 13th of this month, the same day that the Prime Minister is going to be meeting with Joe Biden, in fact, there is going to be an inquiry where the Unification Church must respond to questions that are posed to it by the Diet. They've already been submitted. They need to respond to those. And it could shake up this relationship between Komeito and the LDP because of the similarities between what the Unification Church has done and also the Unification Church's revelations about LDP members supporting them. And the Komeito is going to be listening in on this and realizing that some of the members that they thought were their real buddies and who they've been helping in their election was also getting helped by the Unification Church. So a lot of this is very secret and needs to be revealed under oath. So there is some danger points there. So as a consequence of that, the Prime Minister has been reaching out to the Democratic Party for the People. It is a opposition party that has a lot of depth in Lengo. A lot of Rengo, the Union for Laborers, are members of this party, the DPP. And the Prime Minister showed up at the Rengo's opening New Year's celebration this year for the second time in a row. So it looks like as a part of his new capitalism and raising up the wages, getting more votes from people who feel downtrodden that the government's not taking care of them, this approach now to Rengo, also aligned with the DPP, is beginning to take some sort of a form, and it is really making Komeito displeased with the LDP because they don't want another opposition party to join the coalition. But I think the calculus from the Prime Minister's perspective is he doesn't know how reliable and how long-term the Komeito relationship might be, especially in this next election. So you might remember, and I'm sorry for kind of going into the weeds on it too much, but in the last lower house election, and it happened also in the upper house election, some of the opposition parties joined forces to split votes and to share candidates, or to, I'm not going to vote for, I'm not going to send a candidate in your local election because you won't send your candidate in my local election. So there was a little bit of that, not collusion, but the kind of gaming that these parties did. It didn't work out so well. And it looks like in the next election, not only will they be considering that, but also the next time that there's a lower house election, there's a new rule called 10-10, where some of the houses in the lower populated rural areas need to give up some seats. And some of the election districts in the highly populated big cities, Tokyo, Kanagawa, Osaka, Nagoya, will receive a couple of seats. So the gerrymandering has already gone on. So it is going to be a difficult time. So the Prime Minister is trying to shore up his strengths there by courting some of these opposition parties. And he's promised Rengo that he supports their wage. So the Shunto, the wage labor initiative, starts in spring. It is called Shunto. Happens every year. Labor argues with management. We want higher wages. And the Prime Minister has stood behind Lengo's demand for a 5% increase. And he's talked about this. He's talked about bringing up wages so that people feel richer. They have more wealth. With inflation running right now at about 3.8%, latest figures show that. He's stated publicly that he wants to have wages beyond what the inflation is, so to be able to take care of that. Mr. Kuroda, who is the chairman of the Bank of Japan, is still trying to keep inflation low, but sustainable. He's aiming for 2% inflation. He's overshot that. It is now, depending on what kind of product you're talking about, it's about 3%, 3.2%. He needs to cool that down. His administration, or his presidency, ends in April. So keeping the wages above inflation is a challenge for the Prime Minister. He's committed to it, and he's courting the Rengo and the Democratic People's Party to be friendly and to support them on that. And if I support you, of course, you're going to support me, because that's politics. So a lot of conversation is about, Mr. Kishida's survivability. Is he going to survive as prime minister? And I think all things taken together, he is going to make deals, and he wants to be the leader of the G7 and the summit in Hiroshima. He wants to be there in April, in May. And I think probably for the good of the country, he can get concessions from the people within the LDP to keep him there as long as there's no major scandals, and just to keep things going relatively smooth. And then at the end of that, either resign or maybe close down the House. But I think most of the discussion about Mr. Kishida remaining prime minister for the foreseeable future is becoming a little bit more concrete, just because, number one, there is no really strong contender. The strongest contender would possibly emerge from Seiwakai, the former Abe faction, the largest faction. And then you've got, 4 other factions that are also vying for that. It looks like there's not a large enough force to get Mr. Kishida out unless something else happens, some scandal or some incident, probably a domestic incident, not an international incident. If there was an international incident, it would probably more strongly secure the prime minister's position. But with all of that, I think I'd like to move on. It's kind of deep in the weeds. Let's talk about tourism. Tourism has taken a bump. It has gone up. It has actually increased. Consumer spending has taken a positive move in the last quarter because of tourism. And this is without, they've said this for a long time, the tourism boom is not going to really be as robust as it should be without the Chinese. So before COVID, the Chinese were the largest percentage of people visiting Japan. And these weren't people that were visiting just for the first time. They were repeaters that were visiting. And for that population, that segment of the Chinese population that does have the wherewithal to travel, who has the ability to travel, that number is in the millions. And of course, Japan is a hotspot globally, but particularly with regard to the Chinese. They love to come to Japan. They love to pick up lots of Japanese products, and medicines too. Strangely enough, Japanese medicines are renowned in China because apparently the Chinese medicines, the aspirins, the over-the-counter products don't quite work. They don't have the punch that Japanese products do, and they have a great brand recognition. So the Chinese coming here and purchasing all sorts of things and going back is a welcome thing for Japan. But I think that's not going to be in the cards right now. So as you might have been following, Chinese tourists now are under huge scrutiny. They have to pass COVID tests. They have to submit documents beforehand. They are uniquely segregated among all of the foreign tourists to be able to supply those kinds of documents, even the business travelers. So I think what we're seeing here is this coordinated effort by not just the G7, but maybe the G20 to isolate China, to keep them from traveling, to keep them from the supply chain of chips and condensers, and to really begin to impose sanctions on them for their threats to move on Taiwan. So I think this is going to be building over the next couple of months. But the good news is, Maya, tourism is picking up. We're approaching spring. It doesn't feel like it because it's January, but the days are getting a little bit longer nowadays, and the tourism is really starting to pick up. You've noticed it too?
Yes, I have, and it's wonderful to see actually. So I think that in Tokyo, especially, it's very obvious, and we can see visitors from many different parts of the world, not only from the United States or Western Europe, but also people from South America as well, and Southeast Asia, which is really a great sign for recovery eventually, the much awaited recovery by everybody. So yeah, that's
Yeah. You know, the other thing that we're seeing, Maya, is not just tourists, but people who are emigrating here. There's
Mhm.
been a program, you might remember, there was a lot of Vietnamese that were coming here on these work study programs and also these training programs. And apparently they had such a horrible experience. Many of the Vietnamese had such a horrible experience that they're not coming as they once were to get trained up, to get more skills, to earn money, to send back home. In fact, that whole that whole uh, um,
Dynamic.
dynamic has actually changed. It's cheaper to hire a technician in Tokyo than it is in Vietnam or in Malaysia nowadays. So um, everything is kind of on its head, and people coming to Japan for work are not coming because of the high wages.
No, they are not. But still, the fascinating thing is that they are coming, and obviously, there are other attractive
Yeah,
features of the country. So that, well, it is a good news. But I think that we need to be careful. Probably such people think about staying in Japan in the short term or long term, and there, are, of course, different objectives there. And there is another thing that the kind of labor, the category, if it is physical labor or high skilled labor. So I think that we cannot just,
yeah,
brush or paint everything in one color. So
yeah.
things
I
are
think
going to happen,
the
and we
interesting.
need to.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead. I finished.
Okay, I think the interesting thing is that 2 years ago we were talking about the Vietnamese, and there were a lot of police blotters out on crimes that were being committed by Vietnamese, robbing, fruit plants and petty thievery and stuff like that. And a lot of times it turned out to be Vietnamese. It was played up in the press a lot, but I think there was a lot of other things going on. But now Vietnamese are being replaced by Malaysians, so there are a lot of Malaysians coming into town, and that's just a completely different dynamic because it's a Muslim country, and the numbers being replaced for programs or for study is it's a pretty dramatic shift. But you're beginning to see it all over, not just the tourists.
Indeed, yes, we're beginning to see it all over. Hopefully, it will be a good trend here in Japan. Even though I still believe that the population in general is not ready to
Yeah.
accept a large number of immigrants, and that needs to be addressed. Of course, the politicians are quite apprehensive of what the population thinks, so that's another issue that probably will slow things down once again. But
Well, we have both been in Japan for a long time, and many of the people in the audience have lived and worked in Japan. One of the things that's so interesting about this place is that there are so many things that are counterintuitive. You would think Japan is one way, but it turns out to be another way. And this thing with population and immigrants and tourists, uh, similarly, Tokyo is worried about the overpopulation of Tokyo. And I think you followed this. They're paying families to move out of Tokyo. You're following that, right? Maybe not. Maya, you're frozen. Okay, well, I hope I'm not frozen. In any event, the central government is on a push to move people out of Tokyo to other places in Japan. Too many people are coming in. The young kids are coming into Japan. They're starting their families. They've finished college. They get hired by a big company. And the city and the government is trying to compel these people. You don't need to be in Tokyo. Koike, the governor, Yuriko Koike is the governor of Tokyo, and she has another initiative on that. She is sick of the Japanese government dragging its heels. They're not doing enough for families. They're not doing enough for the overcrowding, for the stresses of living in a big city. So she has her own program, and both of these were revealed to us over the last 2 weeks. So let me just go into a little bit of that. So from the Tokyo governor's perspective, She is offering 5,000 yen per month per child for a family to move out of Tokyo. So there are 23 wards of Tokyo. If you live in Tokyo and you have a young child, 2 children, 3 children, whatever, under the age of 18, and you decide that you're going to move out of the 23 wards, you will receive 5,000 yen, which is about $38 a month until they reach the age of maturity. So it's a little bit of a stipend for to support these families. They already get lots of money from the government in any event. There's a certain level below which your income is. You get maybe Jumayan, which is a couple of $100s every month anyway. But if your income is above a certain amount, you're still getting money from the government because you're raising kids. If you want to have a baby, they pay for that. They're trying to encourage more people to have children. Artificial insemination is completely covered by the government. But now this move to encourage people to move out of Tokyo is taking on a little bit more of a vigorous push backed by money. In Tokyo alone, there are 1.9 million kids who qualify for this. Not all of them, obviously, are going to leave Tokyo, but birth rate for all of Japan has hit below 800,000 per year. So the declining birth rate is causing a lot of problems. And at least for Koike, not only does she want to support child rearing, but she wants to have them move out of the country, out of the city, so that maybe quality of life can be improved. And also this megalopolis, which we know as Tokyo, it spans more than 23 wards. I mean, it goes out into Kanagawa, to Saitama, to Chiba. People who travel maybe 2 hours to get into town. I mean, it's the largest megalopolis in the world, and maybe there's some of that going into this. But that's a lot of money for the state government to provide. On behalf of the national government, they want to pay a family 1 million yen, which is about $7,000, to move out of Tokyo. So if you live here and you're going to move out of Tokyo for whatever reason, the government will give you 1 million yen to do that. But you have to stay out of Tokyo for 5 years. And if you decide to move back, or the company moves you back, you have to pay back that money. So that's a bit of a disincentive. But in any event, if you live in Tokyo and you're moving out, the government will give you sanjumayan anyway. So this is on top of that. And if in fact you decide that you're married, you have a kid, you have 2 kids, and you want to start a company and you're going to move out and do that, then the government even gives you more. They give you 3 million yen for that alone. So there's a lot of effort going into that. You'll remember the supplemental budget that was passed is half as large as the entire defense budget increase over a 5-year period. So a lot of this money is trickling down. Mr. Kishida's incentive and his promise to gear up the economy by focusing on startups. This is one of those examples. If you're going to do a startup and you move out of Tokyo to do it, we will help you. We'll give you 3 million yen to do that. So these kinds of indicia of support for that, they're beginning to come out and be recognized in the press and recognized in actions that the government is taking. So we continue to watch that. Families, children, they've started the children's agency, as you remember. So there is energy being put into that, but really the proof is in the pudding. So we will see. The economy is expected to do okay over the next couple of months because of the tremendous amount of supplemental budget that was put into the economy from now until April. But the predictions are that more than half of the countries that belong to the G7, the G20, will be suffering from recession in this year. So the global economy is expected to take a huge hit because of COVID, because of the supply chain, because of inflation, because of the Ukraine war and the cost of fuel. So This is all really collecting. A lot of countries are going to be suffering this year. Japan will survive it because it's already put money into the economy. That'll dwindle out as the year progresses. And so this year is not predicted. I mean, everybody is so thankful that 2022 is finished and hopeful that 2023 is going to be better. It doesn't quite look that way globally. And also, as far as Japan is concerned, there's a lot of challenges coming up. It is likely that the prime minister will stay. There might be some shakeups in the cabinet. Political stability is going to be his calling card. So I think the prime minister and politically, at least as far as Japan's important trading partners are concerned, will be important. You know, the prime minister received an invitation from Ukraine to visit Ukraine just this last week. With him going to France, Italy, and the UK this next week, and then going to the United States, it is not inconceivable that he does make a side trip to Ukraine. I wouldn't put it past him to do that. This would electrify him as a global leader. He's the leader of the G7 this year. Japan takes the leadership role of the G7. He is a non-permanent. Japan is a non-permanent member presidency of the Security Council. So his star on those levels is rising. I think you will see him more and more robust diplomatically overseas, and he will be really shining the light on himself there. North Korea is going to continue to give him problems. The defense budget is, and how we pay for that, he sidestepped that. I'm sure everybody remembers he sidestepped that by telling the people, you're not going to pay any increased taxes for this year. That means from 2020, the year that we're in right now, and fiscal 2023, which starts in April and ends in April next year, will actually be in 2024. But he said no taxes will be increased on you for that year, the year that I'm prime minister, because I want to stay prime minister, presumably. But it really provides him a little bit of breathing room. With the Defense Department and the Ministry of Defense, the Self-Defense Forces, they're having a real hard time because the budget is increasing so much, but they don't have the number of soldiers that they can recruit. You know, if you're looking for a job in Japan now, the unemployment rate is in the low percentages. Maybe 3% of the people are unemployed. If you want to find a job, you can find a job in Japan. And of the jobs that are available, people really aren't attracted to joining the military, the Ministry of Self-Defense. So they're having a real recruitment problem. The declining birth rate of Japan, the number of people within that core group, maybe 18 to 26 years old, that population nationally was 17 million in 1994. That population this last year was 10 million. So 17 million compared to 10 million in that age group. So the demographics are that the older people are crunching up. They're growing there. People aren't dying according to metrics that were calculated maybe 20 years ago. They're living longer. People are having fewer children. So the pyramid is kind of inverted. So the number of people who could possibly join the self-defense forces, they have other options. There are fewer numbers, and they don't know how they're going to deal with that. The tremendous amount of money that is going into these systems and these developments, the only way you can kind of justify that is you're just going to be paying more money, so the limited number of people you have who are soldiers, who are carrying guns, are actually pushing buttons and managing systems rather than being boots on the ground. So that's going to be a perennial problem for the Japan Self-Defense Forces. And also it has implications for their reliance on the defense relationship that it has with the United States, mostly based on what's going on in Okinawa and the islands surrounding there. But also, if you're a careful listener to these briefings, you'll know that Australia and Britain also have been making overtures to Japan to have the similar relationship that Japan has with the United States, basing their troops in Japan, having port facilities, having facilities where they can land their airplanes and unload cargo and station troops here. So the Japan that you and I knew maybe even 5 years ago is going to be drastically changing over the next couple of years. It's something to keep a careful eye on, and inevitably this calls into question, the peace constitution, Article 9, and the ability of Japan to defend itself by projecting offensively. It is not permitted by the Constitution to do that. With this amount of money, with this amount of ratcheting up going on in North Korea in particular, something has to happen to be able to accommodate all of that. Finally, I want to just talk about a pretty horrible story that happened just on Christmas Day. A friend of mine, Bill Bishop, was murdered. You might have heard of that. He and his wife and his daughter were killed by a neighbor. The news came out on Christmas Day. In fact, the bodies were found, and the individual was arrested that day. Jun Saito, a 40-year-old fellow who has some mental problems. That I knew Bill. I've worked with Bill for maybe 30 or 40 years here. He was very active in the American Chamber of Commerce, and he was very active as a state representative of Indiana. That's when I first met him, when I was working at Apple Computer. So it's a horrible story. I'm sure all of you have heard about that. How that is being settled, and what the evaluation of police response and what they did in the build up to this tension between this individual and the Bishop family is going to receive a lot of scrutiny. But he was a prominent figure, and I lament his passing. I'm really I wish the best to his surviving daughter, and I just wanted to pass that on because it is a newsworthy event. So Maya, that's about it for me. I've gone a little bit long because we talked so much about the Kishida situation. But we can continue on with the Q&A on the LinkedIn, on the Clubhouse portion, if you allow me.
Yes. So I have actually been looking forward to hearing you say that, exactly that. Yes, we have our regular listeners on Clubhouse at the moment. I am sure that everybody's waiting for you to get there so that they can talk with you. There are quite a few questions there as well. So thank you for the briefing. Yes.
Before we sign off, Maya, I just want to make one observation about the audience. So even though we had 2 Sundays ago, it was Christmas Day, we did our briefing. And then the next Sunday, last Sunday, was New Year's Day. And the audience was healthy. The audience sticks with this briefing. So globally, the audience only suffered a little bit because of the fact that it was Christmas or it was New Year's. So that's really a hats off to you.
To you, mostly, predominantly, and well, everything else. So thank you, Timothy. Yes, then yes, let's meet on the other side.
Okay.
If you jump on the board of Saitama, no, Santana, sorry.
Yes, I didn't fall off. I'm balancing tenuously here, but.
All right. Stay there. Stay. Okay.